Welcome to the 11th Ohio Food Policy Summit. As you can see, it's Bring Your Pet to Work Day. I think we've heard from a dog earlier. This is Benny, who is wanting to join the summit. The annual meeting of the Ohio Food Policy Network, which is who puts on this summit, also hosted by the John Glenn College of Public Affairs. And I'm Jill Clark, an associate professor here at the college. I also serve on the steering committee of the Ohio Food Policy Network. I'm a member of my local food council and food board. Tell us who you are, pop your name in the chat. And we've got folks joining us from Ashtabula to Athens and even out of the state. And we are here in part to celebrate our policy wins over the past year. As change makers, you know that this is long, hard work that you do in collaboration with others who are passionate about making Ohio's food system work for Ohioans. You know, whether it's collaborating to get zoning codes to allow for critical food system practices, such as allowing small-scale producers to sell on site, or it's collaborating to get public investments in food system infrastructure to be able to get affordable, healthy foods to your neighbors. Or maybe it's working together to get language removed from Senate Bill 17, after months of lobbying and activism from a statewide coalition of organizations such as Advocates for Ohio's Future, Local Matters, Children's Defense Fund, and many others. Language was removed from Senate Bill 17 that would have put many major barriers up for Ohio SNAP and Medicaid recipients. And this change making is done by all of us in this virtual room, all the organizations you represent, all the hats you wear, and despite being zoomed out, and you still come together to celebrate this past year and plan for more action. And so as a good colleague of mine always says, onward. And just like the policy wins from last year that take a village, so does putting this summit together. Each year, people from around the state volunteer to put the program together. The summit is an all volunteer event, so contact me if you'd like to join us in the future. This year's planning committee is Emily Lipstro, Amanda Osborne, Amy Vasquez, Angela Blatt, Beth Knorr, Elaine McLaughlin-Overholt, myself, Brian Estabrook, Tevis Foreman, Sarah Giannetti, and Michelle Mosquitz-Brown. And you'll see a lot of them today. And I want to give a special shout out to Elaine McLaughlin-Overholt and her, who provided a lot of support in getting us into this virtual room. And I just want to also make a note about next year's summit. It's going to be held in conjunction with the United Nations. And the plan is that our network, and Ohio State will be the North American World Food Day site. So mark your calendars, October 15th, 2022. We have a day filled with voices from change makers representing us in DC, at the Ohio State House, and communities across Ohio. Plenary sessions are in webinar mode, and we encourage you to use the chat. We've disabled the Q&A. And the breakout sessions are in meeting mode, which are a bit different if you are looking to directly interact with participants and speakers. I'm going to, in a moment, pop the link for the programming for today's programming, which you've already received, but I'll pop it in the chat just so you have it handy. And now I'm going to pass the virtual mic on over to Michelle Mosquitz-Brown, the chair of the Ohio Food Policy Network and the executive director of Local Matters, to give us updates on the Ohio Food Policy Network. Thanks, and have a great day.
Good morning. I'm going to hope that everybody can hear me. It's great to be with you all today. Thank you, Jill, so much for the intro. I can't beat the cameos by your pets. No pets here today, but I'm excited to be with you. And I also wanted to thank Adrienne Williams, who co-hosted a cooking class with me last night. It was really great to see some of you to cook some wild rice and butternut squash, cranberries and apples, and really feel that fall flavor. Just wanted to take that moment to celebrate together and remind ourselves of really the joy of cooking together, and to just know that, a lot of times we have maybe a shortage of time, energy, maybe money, skill, but there's just a lot of beauty in a Sunday night dinner together, and the hope that we'll have more of those in person together soon. So really appreciated cooking with some of you, and I hope that you will enjoy the recipe, and I'm sure we can pop that in the chat sometime here today as well. As Jill said, I'm the Executive Director of Local Matters, Michelle Mosquitz-Brown, and Chair of the Ohio Food Policy Network. And I dedicate my time to OFPN because it provides an opportunity to connect with people across the state and work towards what we want for the future of food in Ohio. And as many of you know, OFPN is really about a shared agenda and our ability to put our state's needs above our individual needs, our organizations, or even our areas of expertise and knowledge. And over the past year, since we had our last summit, we did finalize our policy agenda with a focus on farms, access and education, institutions, and infrastructure. And we will dig into that in a variety of ways today. We're also excited to bring more opportunities to connect in the coming year, both formal and informal ways to engage with policy. So look out for that. We also, as Jill mentioned, remain an all-volunteer organization, but it really hasn't stopped us from moving the work forward, including building the network with all of you here. You are OFPN, even if this is your first summit, and feel free to let us know in the chat if this is your first time here. But you all make up the network, and I hope that you will also consider joining the steering committee. We have our application open right now. We'll have at least 4 seats open this year, and those applications are due towards the end of the month, so look out for that in the chat as well. And you know, it's fun to get together and do this planning. I mean, there's a lot of hard work, but we're doing it because we want to put the energy in, and we want to you know, get a lot of change out of working together. This is going to be my last year as the chair of the steering committee, and I want to continue to increase participation from outside of Franklin County, from BIPOC folks who can help steer Ohio's food system to be more equitable, resilient, accessible, healthful, and sustainable. And as we consider the policies that we need to get us there, I hope that we're going to continue to learn and grow from our past and current realities. I believe that we must continue to understand the role of Indigenous people and then Black people that they had in settling our land, the land that we live on here in Ohio. And many of you probably know that Black Americans currently account for just 1% of rural landowners nationwide, but that wasn't always the case. And so as we reckon with this and reckon with systemic racism, I encourage us all to continue to look at power, thinking about how each of us can use our individual power and our influence to share that power, to examine how we operate and why, and to avoid being silent in the face of common injustice, like the lack of economic investment in neighborhoods and access to land, particularly for Black Americans and people of color. I want to again thank the Summit Planning Committee for their focused work on putting this event together. Special thanks to Jill and Elaine and each of you for being here and committing to the work ahead. Thanks also to the Glenn College for hosting us. I hope that you will reach out to me or another steering committee member with any questions. The best way to find us is at ohiofpn.org. If you're not signed up for the listserv, you can click on connect and do that there. Hopefully you'll all be signed up by the end of the day. And if there's anything that stands in your way from participating in the network, please let us know so we can address it. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Emily Lipstro, Policy Director at Ohio Ecological Food and Farming Association and OFPN Steering Committee member. Welcome, Emily.
Thank you so much, Michelle. And I want to just take a minute to thank Michelle for her leadership of this network over the past several years. She's really been an incredible grounding force, giving us a lot of structure and vision for what this network can achieve. So thank you so much, Michelle. As Michelle mentioned, my name's Emily Lipstro, and I'm the Policy Director for the Ohio Ecological Food and Farm Association. And it's really my pleasure this morning to introduce Congresswoman Marcy Kaptur as our morning keynote speaker. Representative Kaptur serves the 9th Congressional District in Ohio, which runs from Toledo all the way to Cleveland. She is currently the longest serving woman in Congress, and during her tenure, she's been a leading advocate for so many of the issues that we care about. For those of you who don't know much about Representative Kaptur, she has graduate education in planning and development finance. She's championed local and regional food systems. She's famously advocated for the rights of contract poultry producers and understands the foundation of agriculture and food systems is soil health. You know, as we were waiting to get started this morning, I went back and looked at some of the marker bills that were advocated to kind of set the tone for the last 2018 Farm Bill. And in looking at that list of legislation that represents so many of the issues that we care about, I thought it was really interesting how many of those bills were sponsored by Representative Kaptur. She sponsored the Local Farms Act, the Organic Farmer and Consumer Protection Act, the Beginning Farm and Rancher Opportunity Act, bills to advance organic research and urban agriculture. And we've seen many of those things now be even more institutionalized in the Farm Bill and future Farm Bills going forward. So, you know, Congresswoman, in light of your ongoing commitment to agriculture, to healthy local and regional food systems, we'd like to recognize your commitment this year by giving you the Ohio Food Policy Network's Food Hero Award. So Representative Kaptur, thank you so much for all you do. We look forward to giving you this award and making sure it gets to you in person here in the very near future. And so now we're going to have a little bit of time for Representative Kaptur to share her remarks, but we'd also have time for some questions. So please take some time and type your questions into the chat for Representative Kaptur. So I would like to turn it over to you, Representative.
Not who you expected. We're just waiting a moment for Representative Kaptur to join us. Oh gosh, you know, and the thing is, if I would shut my office door, you would just hear him cry. So there's no getting away from Benny this morning. Anyway, so maybe we could take this time and talk a little bit about some of the agenda items on the on OFPN's kind of future to-do list. Emily, if I could bring you back and talk a little bit about maybe some of the work around soil health that's been going on.
Sure, Jill. You know, I'm really glad just to have a few extra minutes to talk about some of the kind of farming related things that are on the agenda. One of the things that, you know, the Ohio Food Policy Network cares deeply about is the future of agriculture. And as most of you on this webinar this morning know, access to land is the biggest challenge beginning farmers face. OFA and the Ohio Food Policy Network have supported a bill called the Family Farm Regeneration Act. It's also known as House Bill 95, which would grant tax incentives to landowners who transition their land or other agricultural assets to a beginning farmer. This bill passed out of the Ohio House of Representatives with all but one vote, and has been just in the last couple of weeks introduced into the Senate Ways and Means Committee. So if you care about the future of farming, you know, please consider asking your Ohio State Senator to support House Bill 95. We're hoping this is something that we can have Governor DeWine sign into law during this legislative session. But Jill also mentioned soil health. You know, this is something that is so increasingly on the radar of not just farmers, but food system advocates across the country. You know, we face many challenges in the days and months and years ahead with more frequent extreme weather events And while agriculture is about 10% of the emissions that relate to climate change, agriculture can be a significant part of the solution. And that really relates directly to soil health. We're going to hear from Ohio Representative Juanita Brent later on today, who is hoping to champion a bill to create soil health task force legislation in Ohio to look at what can the state do to really invest in and support farmers that want to make very positive changes in the way they farm to sequester carbon in the soil, to build soil organic matter, reduce their reliance on synthetic inputs, and really just have more healthy soil that contributes to water quality and a number of the incredible ecosystem benefits that relate to that. So that's a little bit about the soil health legislation and the beginning farming legislation that is on the Ohio Food Policy Network's policy platform. And Jill, if we don't have the representative yet, maybe we can share some of those other platform elements.
Sure, and I will pop in the chat the location for that agenda here in just a moment. We have any questions on either of the, I noticed that Noreen was able to jump in and provide, that was House Bill 95. And welcome, Representative Kaptur. Wonderful to see you this morning. I'm going to actually have Emily, would you mind just sharing with Representative Kaptur this morning's announcement about this year's Food Hero? Thanks.
Sure. Representative Kaptur, I'm so sorry that you weren't here earlier just to hear some of the great things that we had to say about you, but we wanted to take some time during this year's summit to recognize the work that you have done in the years past, really in the decades past, as the longest serving woman in the Ohio House of Representatives, as someone with incredible expertise and commitment to soil health, to the rights of contract poultry producers, and to local and regional food systems. You are definitely one of the strongest champions we have for local and regional food systems. And while we were waiting for you, Representative Kaptur, I read off a litany of bills that you sponsored just in the 2018 Farm Bill that are now institutionalized related to local agriculture, organic farming, beginning farmers, organic research, and urban agriculture. And those are all many things that the Ohio Food Policy Network cares deeply about. So in honor of that work you have done, Representative, I would like to present you with the Ohio Food Policy Network's Food Hero Award for 2021. Thank you so much for all that you have done for these issues that we all care about, for your commitment and expertise. And I'd like to turn it over to you to share your comments.
Malia, my goodness, thank you so very much for this unexpected honor that I graciously accept on your behalf, because I was looking at the list of attendees today, various organizations that have been invited, and I was thinking it's your 11th anniversary and how important you really are, how important your network really is, and to guide us. I don't just come up with ideas. Ideas come from people, right? From people that we serve all over this great state, and agriculture remains our foundational industry in so very many ways. Your logo is beautiful, and I happen to have a coffee cup here from one of the organizations we helped to found. You've probably heard of the Center for Innovative Food Technology or the Agricultural Business Enhancement Center. We're always looking for ways to spur agriculture. and to extend its deep roots, especially in this era of climate change. I will go through several items with you and with your listeners. But I wanted to say many years ago when I was first elected, we were in a deep recession at the time, and many of our farmers were going bankrupt, including those who produced livestock. And I kept thinking, how can I help these farmers get a higher value for the hard work they do? And we began to link agriculture to medicine in a way that we had not before. And in the north here, I'm from the northern part of Ohio, we worked with our hog farmers and we produced, they did, I didn't, but I provided some of the inspiration, I hope, and funding. They produced sterile hogs. And the heart valves from those hogs continue to be used in operations across our country. So we created an industry by linking medicine and agriculture. This can happen in 1,000 different ways, right? But that was one of my first efforts in agriculture to try to add value. And the group that I mentioned, the Center for Innovative Food Technology and the Agricultural Business Enhancement Center, I encourage your listeners to go to those websites. I imagine they're listed on this long list of participants, but they are important because they are focused on helping producers of all kinds bring product to market. So for example, pepper. If you grow peppers, they work to try to help you grow the right kind of peppers so that they can be dried and ground up and produce a product that will sell for over $5 a bottle, to try to add value to agriculture. We're always looking for ways to do that. The other day in Washington, we had quite a meeting with the Department of Agriculture and the Department of Energy to try to help our greenhouse producers, our controlled environmental agriculture specialists, to embrace climate change and help to move more production to our region, to restore what used to be here and then disappeared because California had cheaper water and cheaper energy than we did. Now with climate change, guess what? Water's being cut off in California. The Hoover Dam, Lake Mead, if you look at the water levels, they're way down. We are the freshwater kingdom of the world, of the continent, and we simply have to invent new technologies to help us produce in controlled environmental conditions. And there's no better place to do it than Ohio. It used to be Cuyahoga County was the largest greenhouse county. Today it's Lorain County and Lucas County, but we see both in our region of Northern Ohio, right adjacent to Lake Erie, and up in Michigan, just a gigantic greenhouse industry, but most of those greenhouses leak greenhouse gases, methane. And we have to invent new materials, and that's why we have to invent new materials and new processes to raise product, to recapture the vegetable markets that we're losing internationally, to robotically harvest, and to save and reuse all of the waste material when a given crop is picked and we have to replant. So there's a lot of technology that's going to be a part of our future. And I'm just so thrilled to have a few minutes on the program today. Now, we just passed a major bill in Congress this past week. They call it infrastructure, but $47 billion of that bill relates to climate change. And I hope that those who are listening will work with our office and with our land grants, Ohio State and Central State, to really take a look at ways of accessing some of those dollars to meet some of the flooding concerns, water concerns, irrigation concerns, pollution concerns that our farmers have. We're always there to help you do that. I also wanted to just mention we are working as a staff, and then I'll leave it open to questions. I don't want to talk for an hour here, but some of the programs I've worked on try to better link rural Ohio to urban Ohio, to metropolitan Ohio. And two of the programs I really need help from you on in reaching members of Congress are the Senior Farmers Market Coupon Program and the WIC, Women, Infants, Children's Feeding Program, coupon program. This is where people who receive these coupons, thousands and thousands of citizens, can go to their local farm stand, or if they have an electronic benefits transfer machine, or the big farmers markets in the metropolitan areas, and they can use these coupons like dollars. And those two programs are funded at about $20 million nationally. They really need to be $1 billion program. There's that much demand for the program. And we need your help on the next Farm Bill in trying to get that to be a larger voice for these programs. COVID, because of COVID, and thank you for all you've done to, my gosh, what farmers have been through and small producers have been through over the last 2 years is unbelievable. They've had to shift their business framework in order to meet the market in a new way. But there are some additional funds you should be aware of in the American Rescue Plan, which is one of the bills that we passed federally. It has $650 million in total funding, and there's a grant minimum of $1,500 and a grant maximum of $20,000 to help small businesses and nonprofits that are dealing with the expenses related to personal protective equipment, retrofitting facilities for worker and consumer safety, shifting to online sales platforms, which has been a big deal for so many of our producers, transportation, worker housing, and medical costs. So I just wanted to draw your attention to that program and to tell you, if I could tick off just a few more, and we are working with the Department of Agriculture through the American Rescue Plan to provide more funds for local processing. This has been a real problem since the HACCP regulations were passed, as you well know, and there is a $500 million, $600 million in the American Rescue Plan to help smaller meat processing plants located closer to farmers who raise chickens and pigs and cows to help diversify the industry, and egg processing, meat processing. We've lost so many of those companies in our state. So there's funding there to try to restore some of that production. Also in programs like TFAP, the Temporary Emergency Food Assistance Program, there's a $500 million for them to purchase from small business, women-owned, minority-owned, veteran-owned, USDA registered small businesses to submit competitive bids. So there are ways we can help you do that if you're not already registered. Next, local food bank networks. There's $400 million to establish cooperative agreements with states, tribal governments, or local entities like farm groups to purchase food for the food bank network from local and regional producers within the state or 400 miles away from where the food is to be consumed, and from socially disadvantaged producers. The Agricultural Marketing Service is trying very hard to facilitate these new relationships with smaller farmers and producers, which describes so many of our producers in Ohio. We are trying to turn some of these food purchase programs for school meals, for commodities that the food banks acquire from local producers, because local producers, guess what? They're the largest donors to our food banks, and we appreciate that. We thank them for that, but they should also benefit from USDA purchases. So I wanted to point that out. I'll also want to encourage you to take a look at the Loan Guarantee Initiative, which has $100 million in funding to expand capital to farmers for facilities, equipment, and other investments. So there are some other programs that deadlines have passed for this year, but I just point them out to you: the Farmers Market and Local Food Promotion Program and the Regional Food System Partnerships Program. You should take a look at those. We'll help you do that. We'll give you a handout on that so that members of your organization can even be stronger in the next over the next decade as you link more closely to the U.S. Department of Agriculture program. So I want to end there with this phrase: what America makes and grows America. If you look at our trade deficit in the agricultural sector, it is enormous and growing. That means we are importing more food. Strawberries that are imported should be grown in Ohio. if you look at cucumbers that are imported should be grown in Ohio. I could go through the sectors with you, but we must grow, build, manufacture, fabricate here in America. And we stand ready to help you do that. If there are any people from universities listening today, we're always interested in new research, development in terms of products, in terms of systems that can help produce. I saw the most amazing hydroponic platform recently in terms of lettuce. Within 6 weeks, how much can be grown close to home to serve our restaurant community. So please work with us, and we are there to help local farmers access these funding opportunities and your food network to help the farmers do exactly that. Thank you so very much, and thank you for the beautiful award.
Thank you so much, Representative Kaptur. I think, you know, from your presentation, it's clear you're not just the longest serving woman in Congress, but potentially the hardest working woman in Congress. Your grasp of the issues is so incredible. And, you know, you mentioned the local food promotion program, and you talked a little bit about infrastructure. We have a breakout session later today in the summit that deals with the potential to create some mobile meat processing in Ohio. You know, we know that meat processing infrastructure has been such a horrible bottleneck in Ohio for decades. And actually the people who were working, who will be presenting during that breakout session, were able to do a feasibility study for mobile meat processing through the local food promotion program and from a grant received from USDA. So, you know, that's a very real example, you know, of how this advocacy is realized. And, you know, Jill Clark mentioned earlier this concept of change makers, and certainly, you know, people such as yourself, Representative, are incredible change makers. But I think, you know, you even alluded to in your remarks that it takes people within community advocating for these programs as well. And that's just a really important piece of this. We have a few questions, and I want to just back up a little bit. I think you started answering this one already with your great remarks, but the question was, how can the government best support the local economy to increase sustainability and healthy food access?
Well, that's a big question, and that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to tailor these programs that have benefited enormous production in our country in row crop. All right, now we're running into problems with pollution in Lake Erie and pollution in the Everglades and all these places in our country that are troubled by a century of very unsustainable practices. And farmers are working hard to figure out what can they do. I mean, we've got all these mechanisms now where we can actually see how much fertilizer is spread, and the fertilizer formulas are changing. So we're trying as a country to protect the soils, and farmers up here in my region are looking at regenerative soils. It is just a fascinating exploration. And they have come up with this theory. Okay, I'm going to give you this theory. The theory is that if you look at the soil, it's worn out. And if you look at the microbial action that used to occur, it's worn out because we've emphasized a couple ingredients to fertilizer rather than letting nature take her course in the soil. And they believe that if you were to take a sample from your intestines of the various microbes in there, that until that set of microbes matches what's in the soil, people will continue to have all kinds of illnesses. It's very, very interesting what they are doing. Chef's Garden in Milan, Ohio is really spearheading some of that research. And it's at the cutting edge of where America's headed, a country that'll be 500 million people, 400 million people by 2050. We don't know how many, but it's going to be a lot in an area of climate change. So we have to really think about how to retool ourselves to meet that new future. The climate change legislation we've passed in many, many departments gives farmers and food organizations a chance to look at sustainability and how we heal our waters, how we help the soils to be more healthy. I cannot believe I have an experimental garden in my own yard. And I've been working with I'll tell you again, the Center for Innovative Food Technology. Let me tell you, they have a lot of contacts, and how much food we can produce on vertical and flat systems, just in a household. And it's really hundreds of pounds a year, just in the growing months. We don't have it covered production, anything like that. And I've been looking at the carrots. You cannot believe how good the carrots are. And the celery. And when I look at the celery compared to what I buy in the store, oh my goodness. And Chef's Garden taught me that the nutrient value of store purchased celery versus what you grow yourself is it's 50% less from the store-bought variety because the soils are worn out. So we have a big job to do to restore health to what we eat and therefore restore health to ourselves. So I think that cutting edge of close relationships with our universities, with farmers who are involved in research is extremely important. And I'm going to really divert from the question and just say this because of who's on the line here. And you've got folks from Columbus and everywhere. We need help for the federal money that comes into Ohio to educate the people who run some of these state agencies. So for example, I asked the question one time when I go out to the school lunch programs where the federal government spends billions of dollars to acquire product. And I went out to one school and they had one of these green Washington State apples. I mean, it was a red apple, but it was green inside. It wasn't ripe. And I said, I represent apple producers. I was just over at WIT in orchards in Oak Harbor, Ohio. They have the best delicious apples in the world. I don't care where you go, they are the best. So, and McQueen's has the best Honey Crisps. They're like that big and they're delicious. And I thought, we're buying Washington State apples in Ohio? What's wrong with us? And you know what I found out? That Ohio's Department of Education, God bless them, okay, God bless, we need them. They're not agriculture people. They run the schools. They said, well, we got a brochure from Washington State. I said, well, don't the Ohio apple producers give you anything? They said, well, you know, every apple has to be the same size. I said, what? I said, are you kidding me? I said, that's ridiculous. So I'm encouraging the Food Policy Network to please work with the Department of Education, help connect agriculture to them. Help them understand how to reconnect to our local producers. They need help.
Thank you so much for that answer, Representative Kaptur. And I know that, you know, Carol Smathers from Ohio State University is on the line, and through the Farm to School work, they've been working on those issues. There's an Ohio Apple Crunch program that's run every year to try and educate about the opportunities to utilize Ohio produce, including Ohio apples. So it's definitely on our radar, Representative Kaptur, and it's definitely one of the priorities of the Ohio Food Policy Network. Thank you for that. And
thank you.
And just to speak to your comment about soil health, we had Dr. Elaine Ingham speak about the connection between the soil microbiome and the human gut microbiome at our last OFA conference. And it was really compelling and long peer-reviewed research making those connections. So it's definitely an important issue, not just for environmental health, but for public health as well. So thank you so much for bringing that to the fore. We also had a question asking about whether or not there's anything in the Build Back Better Act, also known as the Budget Reconciliation Bill, to build an equitable food system.
The incentives, I don't have all those notes in front of me, but the section on agriculture, you should go to the internet, put in Build Back Better text, and then read what's in it. It's phenomenal. And I've actually just take the forestry section. Ohio and Michigan, because of the emerald ash borer, have to plant over 20 million trees. How are we going to do that? How are we going to do that? And all those trees destroyed, the ash trees destroyed, and others aging out. And with all the rain, we've had a lot of trees fall over up in the region that I represent. I don't think the rest of the state is any exception. And we have to plant a new generation of trees. The Civilian Conservation Corps, the Climate Corps, they're going to call it. There'll be money to do some of that, working with the Department of Agriculture, because that's where the money for forestry comes from. And my concern in states like Ohio is that will we get these trees into the cities where Cleveland used to be known as Forest City, but so many trees have been lost. It's not Forest City anymore. It needs trees for oxygen to get asthma rates way down. The same is true in Columbus. The same is true in Toledo and Cincinnati, all Dayton, all of our cities. And there are incentives in the bill to do that. The question is, how are we going to accomplish that when that particular bill is passed? So there are incentives in the bill that actually surprised me that we were successful for urban agriculture, to try to use new technologies to bring food production closer to people. I had this epiphany a few years ago because I've struggled so hard to get the Department of Agriculture, which was established 200 years ago, to see metropolitan areas. It was established before America had cities, right? And metro areas. We became a great industrial and agricultural power. And when the country was founded, I don't know that people thought that would happen. But anyway, we found the majority of our people living in cities and close-in suburbs. And those folks are deprived, really, of the growing sciences. And if I could be a magic Tinkerbell in every community in America, I would make sure that our children, from the time they're young in school, learn how to plant and grow a garden, even if it's a high-tech garden with vertical grow pads and with, I think every school should have a garden. It's required in Washington, D.C. And children learn. And it's also a very healthy thing to do physically and mentally. I think it keeps you closer to nature. I think one of the problems we have in today's culture is that so much is artificial. Agriculture is not artificial. It connects you directly to Mother Earth. And you learn about the environment, you learn about healthy food. It creates a whole person. And I think many, many generations have gone by now where that has been deprived to the majority of our people. I can remember one congresswoman, she's no longer in Congress, but she said, well, there's no problem with tuna. Just go to the store and buy it. She didn't understand that the oceans have been depleted now. About 75% of the fish are gone. We have to think about how to feed a world with billions of people. And she didn't understand that. So people have been deprived of connection to the earth. I appreciate you allowing me to say that and give a little push here that your Food Policy Council connect to the schools, which I know you are doing in many places.
Thank you. I wish you could know, Representative, about how many boxes you're checking with everything you say. Your remarks are so resonant with this group. So we really appreciate how in touch with these issues you really are. I know that I think Carol shared that about 90% of Columbus City schools are grown in the state. The apples that are used in Columbus City schools, 90% are Ohio grown apples. And
I saw that. I saw, how do we get that to the other places? Columbus, I have to say you are in a very holy place, all right? Because you're right next to the state legislature, you're next to Ohio State, you're next to the USDA's offices. So much of the rest of the state is not. So you're sort of, you're the leaders. Please share that knowledge with these other school systems. Tell them how you did it. help them through your network.
Sure, yeah. Thank you so much, Representative Kaptur. I think we had another question here from Tony Logan. Tony is asking you to speak to are there any other things that you didn't already talk about in the Build Back Better bill before Congress? One of the things that, I just wanted to share from that earlier question about an equitable food system and the Build Back Better Act. We know that communities of color are disproportionately affected by climate change. And I think one of the things that's, in my view, really critical in the Build Back Better Act is serious investments, over 28 billion, I believe, in investments in agricultural conservation programs. So, definitely taking climate change head on is something that's really important for an environmental justice issue for our communities of color throughout the state of Ohio. But getting back to Tony's question, Representative, is there anything else in the Build Back Better bill that you think is important related to sustainable agriculture?
Oh, yes. And it's so major that the agriculture portion actually is the first section of the bill. And it is very, very significant in terms of what it proposes. I've sort of generally summarized the importance of clean soils and clean water, how we're going to get rid of legacy pollution that exists in many places, including leaching septic tanks all over the state, gas wells. There's all kinds of issues, but I suggested that people go to the Build Back Better legislation. Is not to be confused with what we just passed, the infrastructure bill. But even the infrastructure bill has sections in it related to climate change that apply to agriculture. But in the Build Back Better bill, that hasn't passed yet. So I'm a little bit hesitant, but I would suggest that you go to Build Back Better US Congress text, and it'll come up on the internet so you can read the extensive sections that relate to agriculture. There are enormous sections dealing with conservation because we have to have, I mentioned the tree planting issue alone and the water quality issue. We have to figure out, just take my hometown of Toledo. We have so much water, rivers overflowing. We have to create new types of wetlands, and not just in Toledo, but we have to create them in places like Defiance. When we look at the way the water flows, whether it's to the Ohio River system or up north here into the Great Lakes, we tilt a different way than the 3/4 of the state. 3/4 of the state tilts toward the Ohio River. Up here in the north, we tilt toward Canada. So we're in a different watershed, but we have to think, we have to have a watershed mentality. And we have to be able to hold some of this water back. And our farmers, we've had many fields that were washed out. The conservation issue is huge in terms of climate change. The equipment that will be needed, how we produce more efficiently and more sustainably various crops, how we reuse manure. I was in one dairy in Western Indiana, 25,000 head. They used the manure to heat and cool the building. It was amazing, the residue from the animals. So we really have to think of ways. Oh, and I'll tell you, I saw in California, one of my colleagues showed me, we have a lot of manure pits up here in the north, okay? We have a lot of animals, about 12 million animals in this watershed. And they showed me this plastic coverlet that they put over the California dairies, and they produce energy to power their farms. I thought, I've never seen that in Northwest Ohio. Why don't we have that? So there are a lot of ways to deal with greenhouse gas, the conservation provisions, the investments in farms, and our way of life, if we were to pass Build Back Better, would really help agriculture, help America, including with carbon capture, giving credits for that, including with looking at energy production. Let's take solar on unused portions of farm fields. There's a whole new day about to dawn in America with climate change that is directly in the lane of agriculture. So I would suggest looking at that section of the for U.S. Department of Agriculture. And I'd also look at the Interior section, Department of Interior, because of the Forestry Service, and how farmers can benefit from that, assuming we are going to pass it soon.
Well, thank you, Representative. And I think that, yeah, we're very hopeful that those conservation dollars stay in the Build Back Better Act, because we know that that's critical. And I will also want to thank you for centering small and family scale farmers in all of this work that you do, and your discussion of regenerative agriculture, organic and regenerative agriculture that look at, holistic systems, definitely provide many health outcomes. Emily had a question for you. She's asking, when interested parties are seeking legislative change, how can they best prepare their communications and meetings with you so that they're expressing their concerns in a way that can be translated into viable legislation? So how can our folks on the call best prepare for advocating the kind of change that you mentioned and that they care about?
Yes, well, first of all, show up. Members do listen. They do listen, though the majority of members aren't from farms or don't represent large numbers of farmers. So you have to have your voice heard. I would say work as a coalition. Come up with your major recommendations. Let's say there are 3, 4, or 5. When you first come in and you meet a member of Congress, you say, this is our organization, this is how many members we have, this is the region we represent, or the state or the territory, whatever it is. And then say, we're here today to talk to you about, and say it at the beginning, especially with agriculture, because the chances are you're talking to somebody perhaps who lives in a central city somewhere, where they have no connection to agriculture. But so you become a teacher in a sense, and you explain how what you do is relevant to them, because the rivers flow through their towns, even though they may start out in a rural area, right? We have commonalities and common problems that are important to address. Food security for their people, if they're from metro areas or suburban areas. Let me tell you this story. Many years ago, when we tried to fund farmers markets and infrastructure for farmers markets in metropolitan areas so our local farmers could bring their product into the downtown and sell it. I was just at Eastern Market over the weekend in Detroit. I love that place. And you have all these farmers from the state, and it's just thriving. It's just a hub of activity. And I said, let's start one at the Department of Agriculture. Let's do a farmer's market in back of the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C. They thought I was crazy, that I'd lost it, right? So a wonderful man who's no longer living named Gus Schumacher, maybe some of you knew him, agreed with me. He was from Massachusetts. He actually grew up on a farm. He goes, Congresswoman, I'll help you. And so we invited the Virginia and Maryland farmers to come, and the Department of Agriculture, if you've been there in Washington, it's on the mall. Millions of people walk by there every year coming to see the nation's capital, right? So the day we opened it, it was hot as the dickens. We were out there on the tar driveway next to the department, and the people started to come. They were flocking to these farmers to buy apples and tomatoes to have with their lunch and everything. The people from USDA were on the top of the building looking down. These were the people that fought us, that didn't want to do this, all right? That market still exists today. That was done over 20 years ago, and those farmers make money. Now I'm going to tell you another story where rural and urban agriculture and interests converge. At the water and sewage treatment plant in Washington, D.C., which is a strange thing to talk to agricultural interests about, but one of their products is called Bloom. It's a fertilizer. They have figured out a way with EPA approval to work with their local cities to create a fertilizer that is used in Maryland and Virginia. There is a connectivity to be born in every city across this country between agriculture and urban life. And that is an example of it. They call it DC Water. It is the largest metropolitan water and sewage treatment facility that serves 2 to 3 million people in that area. That could happen in every city in America. A rural urban partnership. The area that I represent on the Great Lakes is the largest dredging budget in the country, well, in the Great Lakes. Every year, the Army Corps of Engineers from the ports along Lake Erie dredge up enough material to fill the Cleveland Browns Stadium 400 feet high. Think about that. Now, what can we do with that? That should be an Ohio project, working with agriculture and working with our soil scientists, working with companies like Scott's, working with you name it. Give me the people to work with. But in an era of climate change, we're going to have more water, we're going to have more erosion, and we've got this massive amount of material which we've sent and had tested, and guess what? It's not polluted. But it's sandy. It needs to be blended. We need to create something. For the last 100 years, they've been dumping it in Lake Erie. They've been putting it in confined disposal facilities, right? We have enough technology now we can separate. We can separate product. Why aren't we doing it? Because we're not imagining it. And so I just give you that as an area of, in an era of climate change, where we can propose a big project to the federal government and say, we want to do this in Ohio, and see if we can't accomplish it.
Well, thank you. We only have a couple minutes left, Representative, but there's, I think, an overarching concern among many folks in the network and throughout the state about how we might be able to streamline benefits, whether it's SNAP, WIC, TANF. You also spoke to the Senior Farmers Market Nutrition Program. It's felt that, it can be a barrier for people who want to access local food with all of these separate programs and processes. And I know that even when Ohio had a food policy advisory council many years ago, this is something that was a priority. Are there opportunities to streamline some of these food system program benefits?
Why don't we try it, starting here in Ohio? Let's figure out how to do it. Let's get the undersecretary on the line with us someday. I would ask your group to set up a task force. That would be a really good thing to do. And I'm prejudiced. I want our farmers to benefit. I'm a very locally oriented person. And I think the last several decades have seen America fritter away her local strength to other places. I bet you here in Northern Ohio, I calculated it a few years ago, we probably give away over $1 billion of food power by importing product we could grow. All right. That's a lot of money up where I come from. And I keep looking at ways of how do we get product locally? How do we get it to people? How do we, one of the ways we're working on this to strengthen our local farmers is to try to get our food banks that get all this product through integrators like Cisco to turn it inside out and have our food banks be able to have contracts that they can give to a local farmer to grow lettuce or to grow potatoes or whatever it is, so that we can turn that system inside out and not just give it away someplace, who knows where the cantaloupes come from, but to do it here And so we have to get USDA to turn itself inside out for some of these programs. But I would love to start with you in Ohio. And I think you have a very, very good idea. The programs, I can tell you this, I've been in Congress long enough. When we started to help our local farmers markets have a decent place to show their goods with money in the USDA budget to do that, I saw markets grow in every city and small town. The roadside stands got EBT. We even have a food bank here that has bought a truck, and they have the EBT redemption machine on the truck, and they go around to all of our senior buildings where there are people who need food and they need healthy food. And it makes me feel so good to see that, you know, they're able to work with our local producers. And do you know how much money that is at a national level? We need to turn USDA inside out to see local again. And we have a secretary from Iowa who wants to do that. So I think what you're saying, let's use Ohio as a test case. And I'll tell you who'd be one of our biggest advocates, the new Secretary of HUD, Housing and Urban Development, Marcia Fudge. She was on the Agriculture Committee. Her voice can be important for us inside those cabinet meetings. And she will not be silent, I guarantee you that.
Well, thank you so much, Representative Kaptur. You know, I can't think of anybody more deserving of this Local Food Hero Award than you. So you have been so on point with your comments. I'll tell you that you probably have a lot of volunteers from this meeting today on your charge to experiment with Ohio on streamlining programs. I think you've got a lot of volunteers lined up already. So thank you for being here. We unfortunately have to, we've got a little bit of a break now, after which we're going to have some great breakout sessions. That breakout information is on the website, and Elaine has put that in the chat. So please check out the great breakout sessions that are going to be starting at 10:30. And once again, Representative, thank you so much for all you do.
Thank you, Amalia. And you know, you are an excellent convener. Are you in Columbus, or where are you? You're in Columbus?
I'm with the Ohio Ecological Food and Farm Association in Columbus.
That is the greatest group. That is just the greatest group. And make sure you get some medical people in your group. Medicine and agriculture. Don't forget that. Pharmaceuticals, diabetes. Why aren't we producing insulin in Ohio? Anyway, I wanted to say on the line is Courtney Huska, who's from our Washington office. She's a phenomenal young woman, very, very talented, who's our connection to agriculture. She's helped arrange this. I will make sure she gets you the agricultural section of the Build Back Better bill, which has not passed yet. There were questions about that. You'll see how long it is and why I couldn't go through the whole thing. You can take a look at that. We'll also give you a summary of the recent bill that passed, the infrastructure bill. So you can read through that. It's about $550 billion of new spending, all paid for. And then the regular money that comes down. But you'll see the provisions in there that could have some relationship to agriculture, and we can hone in on those. Okay, so if you work with Courtney, we'll send you information. And I just thank everybody. I wish I knew you all. I saw what you're doing. You're putting new furrows in the ground for our country in this 21st century. You're taking agriculture in a direction she hasn't gone before, but we're building on a wealth of success and hard work and genius that helped our country become what it is today. So now we have to help her. We have to put a few Band-Aids on the system, fix this, fix that. And you're going to lead us in that direction. So I look forward to partnerships that help achieve some of what we've talked about today. And I forgot one important thing. The new chairman, the chairman in the House of the Agriculture Committee is from Georgia, David Scott. He's a prince. He's a prince, the first African-American Secretary of Agriculture in 2 centuries of this country's existence. When he took the gavel, if you see that moment, just watch him, just watch his face. He felt the weight of 200 years falling on his shoulders. He's a good man. And he said to me, Marcy, can you be on the committee? I said, I would love to, but I chair something now and I have my own responsibilities. I said, but I want to help you. He goes, well, go view the film, Kiss the Ground. And I tell you that as listeners, because that is the perspective of the new secretary, of the new chairman of the Committee of Agriculture in the House of Representatives, and the chairman of the Appropriations Committee, which is what I serve on the Agriculture Subcommittee, is also from Georgia. His name is Sanford Bishop from Albany, Georgia. He's got all kinds of issues in his region of Georgia, but Georgia, like Ohio, has a lot of small and medium-sized farmers. And they work hard and they try to innovate and they try to deal with climate change in their areas, but make friends with the Georgia folks, because if we work together and we work with them, we change America.
Very wise words. Thank you again, Representative, for all that you do. And we look forward to talking with you more again in the future.
Thank you so much. And thank you for the beautiful award.